A mermaid expresses that she hates humans, a feeling left over from a long-ago past that hasn't completely faded. She has grown used to the surrounding silence, until a human boy appears. He is different from the others, the kind of human who might actually care for someone like her, crossing a line that was never meant to be crossed. Earlier that night, in a deserted city, the young lad stands alone on a bridge, lost in thought, looking down at the dark water below. Unexpectedly, he jumps into the river, cold water splashing around him. The narrative shifts to the present. Inside the yokai manor, a young man stands under the open sky, holding a shining object and studying it with interest. The item is made of rare, glossy scales from a huge reptile, clearly valuable and well cared for. Beside him is a small, rabbit-like creature, gentle and cute. The exchange is quick and smooth. Payment is made, and the item changes hands without any trouble. Nearby, a mermaid watches the transaction unfold. The young man turns toward her, clearly pleased with the deal, and already anticipating future business. He addresses her as Mermaid Princess, but she rejects the title outright. Once, she may have held such a status, but that time is long gone. Now, Sarah works as a trader and wields authority over the yokai manor. Shinomiya acknowledges her former standing, noting that many still refer to her by that title. Sarah, however, dismisses it firmly. The mermaid settlement has long since been wiped out, leaving no throne, no royalty. The destruction began when humans started hunting mermaids, motivated by false beliefs and reckless greed. Shinomiya reacts with amusement at her bluntness, finding her attitude sharp and unfiltered. He reflects on the era when people believed mermaids possessed miraculous properties, chasing after a cure that never truly existed. Ironically, now that only one mermaid remains and has become a trader, collectors like him can obtain rare items without bloodshed. From his perspective, this makes him fortunate. Sarah abruptly signals that their meeting has reached its end. She mutters bitterly that wealth often dulls people's empathy, directing her frustration at Shinomiya. He, in turn, seems amused by her irritation. Sarah insists she isn't angry and points out that today, belief in mermaid legends has mostly faded. Still, Shinomiya recognizes that foolish individuals exist in every age. He is careful to point out that those who deal in such items protect the trader's whereabouts, ensuring secrecy. Before leaving, he offers a warning for her to be cautious when selecting future clients. He values her presence and hopes their mutually beneficial relationship continues for many years. Sarah reflects inwardly on her past betrayals. Experience has taught her not to place her faith in humans easily, and Shinomiya is no exception. With that unspoken boundary established, she allows him to leave. Shinomiya leaps into the water and disappears beneath the surface, leaving the manor behind. After he leaves, the method leaves a trace behind. The water crossing acts as instant travel, connecting distant clients directly to the garden. Once the space is quiet again, Sarah reflects on the thought that lingers. The last mermaid survived only by becoming a merchant. She dismisses the thought as foolish. This path is not a choice made lightly, but the sole means left to her. Trade becomes a method of endurance, a system created by those of her kind who managed to avoid annihilation. Since ancient eras, desire has flowed in both directions. Humans long for the rare possessions of yokai, while yokai are drawn to the gold produced by humans. Over time, stability settles in, exchange replaced violence, and transactions now occur without injury or loss of life. Currency and artifacts pass peacefully between humans and yokai, with merfolk acting as brokers between the two realms. Because of this balance, their presence is highly sought after. By controlling the spread of knowledge in the human world, merfolk prevent future hunts from forming. The method works. Every agreement also includes safeguards, making sure that those who benefit from trade are responsible for removing any threats to the intermediaries. Even so, Sarah recognizes how persuasive Shinomiya can be. Experience has taught her that clever humans are often the most dangerous. Her minion mentions his appearance. Lying near the bridge, she reacts sharply when the small, rabbit-like attendants hint at something more. To her, he remains human, nothing beyond that. The attendants persist, gently pressing the idea that she has spent too long ignoring personal connection. They remind her that even now, she is still regarded as royalty. For centuries, she guided her people and maintained harmony. Watching her dedicate herself entirely to commerce leaves them uneasy. To them, the difference between yokai and human seems unimportant when it comes to her happiness. Sarah does not harbor resentment toward people of the present age. Unlike many of her kind, she refuses to live trapped in memories of loss. Still, she firmly believes there is no reason she should feel anything beyond professional interest. Humans are merely clients, partners in exchange, nothing more. And even so, she cannot help but trail off in thought, leaving the idea unfinished. A sudden sound rises from the water, breaking the calm. Sarah becomes alert. wondering whether another visit had been planned. She knows she has not opened any route herself, which makes the disturbance unsettling. Moments later, our MC emerges from the water, soaked and disoriented. He looks down at his own body in disbelief, struggling to understand why he is still breathing. When his eyes lift, they land on the mermaid standing before him. Shock freezes him in place. Sarah studies him carefully, considering the possibilities. Either he has fallen into the nearby river accidentally, which rarely happens, or he is a human who has crossed the boundary by chance. The young man stares at her as though unsure whether what he sees can truly exist. Sarah wonders whether he tried to end his own life. She remarks inwardly on how ironic it is that humans call mermaids rare, when humans themselves disappear just as easily. As he speaks about mermaids being treated as endangered beings and hunted for that reason, she understands that he is not one of those obsessed with false legends of miraculous cures. That realization settles something within her. Despite everything, she still stands alive before him. The young man continues to look at her, overwhelmed, and eventually lowers himself in apology, burdened simply by being human. Sarah observes him closely and immediately notices how unlike certain others he is. Compared to those driven by greed and cruelty, this one feels different, not admirable, perhaps, but not worthless either. She questions the meaning of his apology. He has not lived long enough to commit the wrongs of the past, nor has he personally caused the suffering carried by her people. The small rabbit-like attendants react proudly, noting how strong her heart remains, just like a true princess. The young man reacts sharply to their interruptions, still trying to make sense of everything around him. Sarah refocuses on him, reminding herself to be cautious when choosing new clients. She understands this better than anyone. Human lives pass quickly, and many of those she trades with are nearing their final days. The time has come to find new ones. As she watches him, his condition becomes clearer. Though he insists he is doing fine, his appearance suggests otherwise. The thought crosses her mind that he may not have much money at all. Confused, the young man asks where he is. He remembers falling into a river, but cannot understand how he ended up here. Sarah explains the nature of the waterway, how it can, on rare occasions, guide someone along a hidden route into her garden. Most mermaids still despise humans, and stumbling into such a place without purpose usually ends badly. His survival is nothing short of luck. She asks whether his fall was intentional, and notes that wasting one's life makes little sense, especially if one possesses money. He denies that his situation has anything to do with such intentions. Instead of pressing further, she proposes something practical, an agreement. He hesitates, but begins to understand that she is offering to make him a client. Sarah lays out her rules clearly in her mind. She does not participate in exchanges that cost lives, whether human or yokai. Her own kind is never a commodity. She identifies herself as a trader who deals in yokai goods in return for payment. The attendants eagerly prompt him to consider what he desires. The question catches him off guard. He struggles to answer, then finally settles on something simple. Before he can say more, his body gives out and he collapses. Shock ripples through the garden. Sarah rushes to him in alarm, frustrated and incredulous at the timing. The attendants quickly conclude that he truly is penniless and wonder whether he should simply be sent back to the human world. Sarah refuses. She orders them to prepare food, reasoning that they can at least demand payment later. The attendants point out her sweetness once again, teasing her for it. She immediately denies any sympathy, insisting that this is nothing more than business. She cannot leave him in this state. As she looks down at the unconscious human, she can only hope that once he awakens, he will be able to make a proper deal. The two small attendants carry the unconscious young man away from the garden and bring him to a secluded cottage nearby. Inside, they lay him down carefully and begin preparing a meal for him. The space hums with quiet activity as food is prepared for his recovery, ready for him when he awakens. The scent of food causes the boy's eyes to flutter open slightly. Still half asleep, he reacts to the aroma before he is fully aware of his surroundings. Without waiting, Sarah places food directly into his mouth. He jolts upright at once, startled by the heat, the sudden sensation forcing him fully awake. The food is hot enough to make him panic for a moment. As he chews, however, he realizes that the flavor is well balanced and satisfying. Despite the surprise, it tastes genuinely good. Sarah has prepared rice balls, a dish that represents what humans typically eat. She indicates that the other dishes have been set aside and urges him to eat properly. When he wonders whether she made the meal herself, she clarifies that only the rice balls are her work. Given the nature of her familiars, she had no option but to shape them on her own. The boy finds the gesture cute. He reflects on how long it has been since he last ate a meal made at home, having relied on eating outside for a very long time. The experience brings him comfort and a quiet sense of happiness, faintly reminding him of meals from his childhood. The rice balls are plain, without decoration. This prompts Sarah to react sharply to an unspoken comparison. She then points out that he is soaked and dirty and instructs him to stay away from the tatami room. Only then does he realize that this answers why he had been sleeping on the porch. Turning serious, he asks himself why someone like Sarah would save a human such as him. Sarah's reasoning is simple. She expects proper compensation. When she asked what he wanted, his answer had been food, and she is merely responding to that request. He recalls saying it, yet he struggles to believe that such a small reason alone led to his rescue. From her perspective, there is no other motive involved, and she makes it clear that kindness is not part of the equation. His thoughts drift to the past. The history of mermaid hunting is not something that can be erased by the passage of time. Humans caused countless deaths, and for a mermaid to become a traitor and choose coexistence is a path filled with contradiction. Sarah acknowledges that many mermaids besides herself still harbor deep resentment toward humans. When he considers whether she feels the same, she looks at him and smiles faintly. She does not deny the bitterness outright. Instead, she clarifies that clinging to hatred and resentment only steals one's happiness. Because she survived, she chooses a life that is lighthearted and free. She believes that no one should grieve over or apologize for wrongs they did not personally commit. At the same time, she admits that there are humans who are capable of understanding the suffering of others. Even so, she is quick to distance herself from any misunderstanding. This outlook does not mean that she likes humans. To her, humans are divided into two simple categories: customers and those who are not. Nothing more than that. If anything, her distrust remains strong, and her dislike has not disappeared. At that moment, one black rabbit approaches, carrying a glass of warm water, and hands it to the boy. He accepts it and expresses his gratitude before turning his attention back to Sarah. He reflects on her way of living and finds it deeply admirable, to the point that it overwhelms him. He wonders if he were a yokai instead of human, would he have felt this despair at all? He decides that he will give her everything he owns, regardless of whether he ever becomes a customer. He then reveals that he had intended to die from the very beginning, making his wealth meaningless to him. Sarah's thoughts darken as old fears surface. She recalls the belief that mermaids will be hunted until none remain, that their end is inevitable. Anger rises sharply within her, and she reacts forcefully. She demands his name, pulling him back into the moment. Startled, he gives it, identifying himself as Sora Yamabuki. His defeated outlook only irritates her further. She addresses him sternly, making him listen. If he is so prepared to throw his life away, then he should at least cling to his wealth while doing so. For a traitor, taking money without an agreement is a humiliation. She points out the contradiction in him. Humans possess enough greed to push mermaids toward extinction, yet he chooses to abandon his life without wishing for anything at all. By offering her his money, he has made himself her customer, and she refuses to allow him to die before he has truly lived. If the human world is too painful for him to endure, then she insists that he live among the yokai instead. The thought of his resignation and waste of life is what truly fuels her anger. Sora turns to Sarah and asks whether she treats everyone with the same kind of encouragement. She reacts defensively, insisting that she is not motivating him out of concern. From her perspective as a trader, it's simply necessary for potential customers to stay alive. Before she can settle the matter, the two rabbit-like attendants approach her, pointing out that her behavior follows a familiar pattern. Flustered, she tries to explain that there was no real reason for him to die, especially given his youth. As Sora listens, he quietly concludes that kindness must be part of her nature, even if she hides it behind embarrassment. The thought had never occurred to him before, but now the idea of staying in the yokai world begins to form in his mind. He acknowledges that he spoke rudely earlier and apologizes, then resolves to keep living and become her customer. Sarah reacts with surprise and asks what he wants in return, noting that wealthy customers are always welcome. Sora considers carefully and then asks if there's a way to turn a person into a fish. The question shocks her, and she assumes he wants revenge on someone. Drawing from experience, she sees such thoughts as pointless. Sora explains that he hopes the change might allow him, as a human, to remain in the yokai world. Sarah reflects on his logic and finds it deeply strange. She questions whether he truly wishes to live in that place and clarifies that mermaids are not fish. She then offers an alternative. suggesting that she could introduce him to yokai who have adjusted to life near human settlements. If he despises his hometown, relocating would be easier, since a yokai manor would not suit a human. Even if he were to stay nearby, she implies that living there would be impractical. Sora refuses that option. If he is going to keep living, he wants it to be there, close to her. He hesitates before asking whether there might be another solution, admitting that such a sudden comment would naturally trouble her. Sarah reflects on his words and realizes that the situation is less troublesome than it is unexpected. Suddenly, Sora proposes a different idea. He offers to pay for lodging and help with work around the mansion, questioning whether such an arrangement would be acceptable. Sarah reacts by thinking that it is strange for someone to desire living in a yokai's home so strongly. Even so, Sora continues, unwilling to abandon the idea. Sarah considers the situation and realizes that she does not have a clear reason to turn him away. If the arrangement fails, other possibilities can be explored later. It is her first time allowing a human to stay under her roof. He is undeniably odd, yet his desperation is evident. Even so, she notes to herself that it is not as though she finds him unpleasant. Trust is still absent, but outright rejection does not feel justified either. After weighing everything, she accepts the arrangement. She is confident that things will settle in their own way, as they usually do. She makes it clear in her mind that the lodging cost will be taken in full. Those around her observe that her nature is softer than she admits. Thus begins a peculiar story centered on an unusual meeting with a strange human, one who once claimed he wished to become a fish. The future of this partnership stirs a quiet sense of anticipation. Over the past week, Sarah pieces together what kind of person Yamabuki Sora is. Taking him in had been an impulse, yet the human turns out to be unexpectedly useful. He handles daily chores without complaint, whether it is cleaning indoors or working outside. Before long, the familiars accept him, drawn in by his genuine interest in yokai. Even so, one thing stands out to her. He doesn't seem to be working toward anything, Sarah thinks. He has no obvious goal, and his finances remain uncertain. Still, the way he carries himself leaves a consistently good impression, polite, earnest, and careful not to overstep. At one point, he offers money for his stay as payment for lodging. The gesture does not go unnoticed. Observing this, Sarah privately comes to regard his presence not as a burden, but as a fortunate outcome. Later, Sarah explains the entire situation to Shinomiya. He reacts with visible disbelief and questions the wisdom of allowing an unfamiliar boy to remain in the residence overnight. Sarah acknowledges that she initially shared the same caution. She lays out the facts as they stand, admitting that from a purely rational standpoint, Sora appears deeply questionable. Not long after arriving, he collapses. Before that, he throws himself into a river in what appears to be an attempt to end his life. Even with full awareness of these circumstances, she still chooses to help him. Shinomiya interprets her decision as being influenced by profit and recalls a recent warning about exercising caution with unfamiliar clients. Sarah does not waver. She maintains her stance and asserts her confidence as a trader, insisting that she is capable of accurately judging another's character. During a trade, Sarah places an item on display. The discussion turns to the purchase of fish, and the price is stated clearly. Sora agrees without hesitation and completes the transaction smoothly. The item involved proves to be ancient sea monster remains, acquired by a sea-dwelling yokai. Afterward, Shinomiya makes a light remark, implying that Sarah's kindness is already well known. She meets the implication with an immediate defensive denial. At that moment, a familiar appears and offers delivery services through the trader's system. Sarah accepts the option, and a specialized transportation technique activates, allowing the parcel to travel directly to its destination. Even so, Shinomiya questions Sarah's motive. Accepting a new customer makes sense, but providing shelter does not. The feeling remains that another reason lies beneath the surface. For a brief moment, that possibility crosses Sarah's mind. She considers it in silence, reflecting on what it would mean to continue existing in the same place as Sora. The thought resembles the persuasive words humans often use when approaching mermaids, something she regards as unrealistic and far removed from her own world. Such behavior is familiar to her, and she learned to be cautious through experience. Yet Sora does not fit neatly into those established patterns. Despite herself, she senses a difference. The realization startles her, and she rejects it almost immediately, reminding herself that he is human and nothing more. Just as quickly, she dismisses the thought and insists internally that there is no particular reason behind her actions. Shinomiya shows interest in seeing Sora. Sarah explains that he has stepped out to gather food for the evening meal. Elsewhere, Sora moves through the water and notices a tunnel beneath the surface. Surprise follows as the current rushes past him. Before long, the passage opens outward, revealing a vast body of seawater beyond. The scene confirms the presence of a true ocean hidden within. Sora moves along the mountain path, recalling the doubts he once held about whether places like this truly existed beyond stories. Following the instructions he received, he makes his way toward the shore to gather clams. With each step, the surroundings feel increasingly unfamiliar, clearly distinct from the human world he once knew. Even the land itself seems to carry the unmistakable presence of yokai. Carefully, he passes through open fields and continues along a narrow trail lined with bamboo until the ocean finally comes into view. Upon reaching the water's edge, he steps into the shallow surf. As waves roll in, shells drift toward him effortlessly. Gathering them, he notices that many surface on their own. Among the clams, one draws his attention due to its size. While handling it, a faint gleam beneath the water catches his eye. He reaches down and retrieves the shining object, lifting it to examine it more closely. It is not a shell, but a smooth, multicolored object that reflects light like a prism. Holding it carefully, he considers its potential value and decides to bring it back with him. Wondering whether it might be some kind of gemstone, he thinks it could appeal to the merchant instincts of the mermaid. At the same time, a doubt arises. Given her refined yet simple manner of dress, she might not wear such an item. Even so, the thought stays with him, and he quietly imagines how well it might suit her calm, understated elegance. After finishing the gathering, nearby movement catches his attention. One of the rabbit familiars approaches and checks whether he has collected anything. Sora acknowledges the familiar and reflects on how hard it is to tell them apart, since they all look identical and have no individual names. He shows the contents of his basket and wonders if the amount is enough. The familiar explains that their kind does not need food, as water alone sustains them. It reassures Sora that what he has gathered is more than sufficient for both himself and the mermaid princess. Hearing this, Sora thinks about how convenient such a life must be and feels a quiet sense of envy. His attention shifts to a nearby passage connected to the sea. Curious, he asks about its purpose. He learns that it leads directly to the ocean through a barrier that circulates seawater, while the surrounding mountains remain impassable to living beings. This makes him wonder whether the technique belongs to the mermaid herself. The familiar confirms that while all mermaids control water, the princess far surpasses the others in skill. Sora silently agrees, acknowledging her exceptional nature. Thoughts of his own situation follow, leaving him grateful and surprised that someone like her allows him to stay without questioning his past or intentions. The familiar explains that human concerns mean little to the princess, then bluntly reminds him of his earlier fear and weakness. Sora accepts this without protest and nods quietly. The familiar continues, explaining that yokai view such matters differently. Sora understands and recalls the moment he decided to continue living as her guest. The familiar mentions that the decision made the princess happy, even if she refuses to admit it. Despite her distrust of humans, her gentle nature is clear. At that moment, Shinomiya appears and warns Sora not to repeat the mistakes that once led him to disappointment. Startled by the presence of another human, Sora turns toward him. Shinomiya introduces himself, explaining that he's also a guest, suggesting that since they share the same position, they should spend some time talking together. Sarah looks at Sora's basket and notices clams inside. She remembers that she asked Sora to handle it. Bunny informs her of the situation, and Sarah is surprised. She recalls that a few years ago, when they had talked about acquiring a new customer, Shinomiya went to greet him. The client canceled the contract abruptly and left a letter apologizing for no longer being able to work with her. Sarah wonders whether Sora is being threatened as well. At the time, she had not thought much of it, recalling that he had mentioned making up for it and buying the share himself. Bunny suggests that perhaps Sora was simply not destined to be her client if he leaves because of Shinomiya's influence. Sarah reflects that, while destiny might be involved, she worries about what will happen to Sora afterward, now that he has decided to try living there. She pushes aside her thoughts, deciding to act instead. She moves quickly to rescue Sora from Shinomiya, remembering that she first became the princess's client when she was a child. As she dashes forward, it feels as though Sora is like a princess in distress and that she must reach him. Sora and Shinomiya sit by the edge of the sea. Shinomiya recalls about how they have known each other for years. He was moved when his father first introduced him to her, never imagining that a yokai could possess such beauty. Sora questions to himself what they are even doing, while acknowledging that Sarah is undeniably beautiful in her own way. Shinomiya explains how he became connected to the princess and mentions his family's long-standing wealth, which goes back to his great-grandfather. He then asks about Sora's background, admitting that he does not really know who Sora is. Our guy answers carefully, remarking that memorizing someone else's personal assets seems like a strange thing to do. Shinomiya comments on Sora's past attempt at ending his life while carrying a large sum of money and notes how quickly he adapted to living in the princess's mansion. He observes that Sora is clearly not an ordinary person and hints at knowing more about him. Shinomiya then asks whether Yamabuki Sora is truly his real name. At that moment, Sarah arrives and scolds Shinomiya for saying unnecessary things to Sora. Sora looks at Sarah and greets her, noticing that she seems upset. Sarah quickly tells him to ignore Shinomiya, scolding him for sometimes bothering her clients and driving them away. She directs her frustration at Shinomiya, who tries to explain, but Sarah cuts him off and insists he should leave after just greeting. Shinomiya makes it clear that he does not wish to earn the princess's resentment. Hearing this, Sarah immediately grows uneasy. The thought that Sora might abandon his position as her customer crosses her mind, accompanied by the fear that he could even give up on living altogether. She also worries about the loss such a decision would bring to her income, so she hurriedly tries to prevent that outcome. She reassures Sora, emphasizing that there is no reason for him to feel troubled or to step away from his role. Despite being human, she considers him respectable enough to remain under her protection. The idea of him leaving the island and returning to self-destructive thoughts unsettles her, even if she struggles to put those feelings into clear terms. Whatever Shinomiya may have said earlier, she insists that she alone determines who may remain a customer and wealthy patrons are always welcome. Sora responds with calm certainty. He reflects that abandoning life would only break the resolve he made to continue living and to stay by her side. Leaving would also mean losing the chance to see her again. As for the earlier confrontation, he had already judged it harmless and paid it little mind. This reaction surprises Sarah, prompting her to reconsider how tough he truly is. Not long after, Sora draws her attention to something he has discovered and shows her a luminous object. Sarah immediately recognizes it as an extremely rare and valuable treasure, one that should not easily appear. She understands that it has formed naturally along her shore, something so unlikely it borders on the miraculous. When she explains its origin, she cannot help feeling frustrated by the implications. If humans begin uncovering such valuables on their own, her trade would suffer greatly. Even so, she cannot ignore that Sora seems to possess extraordinary fortune when it comes to discovering riches. Sora offers the treasure to her, intending it as a gift. Sarah reacts strongly, unwilling to accept vague generosity in place of proper exchange, especially in matters of business. The idea that he would give something so valuable without asking for anything in return leaves her stunned. His reasoning is simple. He hopes it will sell well, and since she refused money before, this feels like a better offering. Sarah accepts it gladly, showing genuine gratitude and recognizing his sincerity. When Sora comments on her appearance in a way that differs from the usual praise mermaids receive, it catches her completely off guard. She does not expect such words from a human, and the realization unsettles her more than she wants to admit. As they get ready to return, aware of the waiting familiars, Sarah reflects on what she has learned about Sora Yamabuki. He is unusual, undeniably so, but not unpleasant. She notices an unfamiliar warmth spreading across her face and cannot immediately explain it. Meanwhile, Shinomiya doubts Sora being a yokai enthusiast who once tried to end his life while carrying great wealth. He doubts she could trust someone like that. Deep in the mountains, far from any human settlement, stands a mansion known only to a few humans and many yokai. Within its walls resides a mermaid of unparalleled beauty who works as a trader. Sarah returns home, and Bunny accompanies her, observing the mermaid. The mermaid is striking, her beauty remarkable even among yokai. Despite her elegance, her personality is relatively blunt and direct, a trait common to mermaids. Words spoken to her by Sora, an unfamiliar compliment, still linger in her mind, prompting her to reflect quietly on what was said. Bunny draws attention to a particular item, reminding Sarah of the rainbow pearl Sora had discovered a few days prior. Normally, she would have offered it for sale immediately, but for some reason, she chooses to keep it with her for now. She decides that she will not present it until she has fully appraised its value, and Bunny arranges for it to be stored in the water vault, an underwater treasure repository. Sarah considers the unusual nature of the pearl. For a human to possess such an item, he must have a considerable amount of spiritual power. She notes his quick adaptability, understanding that it stems from his innate spiritual awareness. Although the world of yokai is slowly blending with human society, the rainbow pearl is a rare creation, manifesting only when touched by someone close to yokai or spiritual beings. Sora was certainly surprised to encounter a mermaid, yet he understands yokai traits and their transformations. As a trader, Sarah decides to treat him carefully, regarding him as a valued customer. She knows that he does not appear to pose any threat. So, she will maintain a professional distance, interacting strictly as business partners. When dealing with humans, caution is necessary, but careful observation confirms that there is no immediate danger. Outside, the sound of water reaches the mansion. Bunny notices a visitor, and Sarah recognizes him as Sora. She understands that in the cold weather, it must be difficult for a human to endure, and quickly prepares something for him to wrap around himself. Bunny promptly follows her instructions. Sora arrives, shivering from the sudden chill. Sarah hands him warm clothing, mindful of how exposed he is to the cold. When he sees the muffler, he reacts with surprise and then smiles, noting how well it fits. Startled by his remark about its appearance, Sarah urges him to put it on quickly before he catches a cold. She also brings a shawl for him, acknowledging the necessity of keeping winter clothes ready. Observing the garden, she notices that it seems to cycle through the seasons unusually quickly, a result of having a yokai client. Sora looks toward a bridge and identifies a yokai nearby. Her name is Botan, a Yuki-onna, a well-known spirit from Japanese folklore who embodies the nature of winter. Botan rushes through her story about the man, Yukiya, who promised loyalty but now chose someone else. She mentions the repeated disappointments, lonely nights, and the familiar pain of being replaced when money runs out. On an early summer evening in the city, his kindness during sickness turns into attachment. Just hearing that name is enough to stir old feelings. She kept returning to the trader's shop because the meetings always needed a lot of money. She mentions that the guy acts super nice but changes the moment she runs out of cash. Botan is a yokai who blends effortlessly into the human world, going mostly unnoticed. She has a normal job, but she spends too much and leans on Sarah constantly. Watching quietly, Sora understands the situation clearly. The man earns her affection as part of his work. Even knowing this, her attachment doesn't change. Sora reflects on how strange it once seemed that yokai would have any use for human currency at all, and now the answer becomes clear. Sarah explains that this is only one case among many. When introductions are finally made, Botan acknowledges Sora as a human guest. Sora accepts this calmly and gives his name, while Sarah remarks that he seems unusually content to remain away from the human world. The atmosphere of the place, shaped by Sarah's careful attention, makes such feelings easy to understand, even if she herself denies being especially gentle. The Yuki-onna credits her freedom to pursue human relationships to the trading system Sarah established. With valuables exchanged for money, there is no longer a need for violence or theft, and fewer reasons exist for exorcists to interfere. For yokai who wish to live alongside humans, such services make coexistence possible. Gratitude turns openly affectionate, leaving Sarah flustered, though she insists it is nothing more than a practical result of a mermaid struggling to survive. Sora notices the color rising in Sarah's face and quietly points it out. He then considers whether it is appropriate to remain silent and wonders if Botan truly understands the nature of the work her lover does. She does understand. She knows that affection lasts only as long as payment continues, and she accepts that reality. She also knows he has no understanding of spirits and would likely run in fear if he discovered the truth about her. If money can preserve something that feels like love, she sees the cost as worth it. Sarah thinks back to the past, when fear and resentment shaped how humans and yokai treated each other, and how that hatred once led some Yuki-onna to cruelty. Those stories are recorded and retold, and Botan admits that such bitterness touched her own family as well. Sora points out that certainty can only come from honesty, but Botan cannot risk rejection. Afraid of being hated, she asks Sarah to convert another item into cash. The object she offers is small and sealed, containing intense cold. It can chill a modest room and is something she can create only once each year. Sora notes its surprising usefulness, but Sarah assesses it plainly. Its limited lifespan reduces its worth, and the exchange results in only a modest payment.
Here I am.